on The Power of Optimism, the Condensed Classics, Chapter 6, How to Project Your Thoughts. Anyone who has traveled through the great farming belts of our country and Canada can tell by a glance at the house or barn whether the farmer is alive or whether he is dying on his feet. I think of some of the great orchidists of the Pacific Northwest, who 20 or 30 years ago couldn't sell a whole wagon load of pears or apples for $20, and yet men who had the idea of attractive packaging and marketing in recent years have made large fortunes. It's nothing to get people to pay $2 or more for a dozen apples or pears carefully wrapped in tissue, wax paper, or tinfoil. Some of these alert orchidists sell their products by mail to thousands of buyers throughout the world. I happen to know personally a number of these operators, and their successes in each instance have been predicated upon an idea that came to them in a flash that developed as a result of their believing. Now consider this matter of packaging in connection with yourself. Do you have eye appeal? Do you wear clothes to give yourself the best appearance? Do you know the effect of colors and study those which best suit your form and temperament? Does your whole appearance set you apart from the many who pass unnoticed in the crowd? If not, give thoughtful attention to personal packaging, for the world accepts you as you appear to be. Take a tip from the automobile manufacturers, the Hollywood makeup artists, or any of the great show producers who know the value of eye appeal and package their goods accordingly. When you have a combination of proper packaging and highest quality goods within the package, you have an unbeatable combination. The you within can do the same thing for the you outside, and you too have the unbeatable combination. To satisfy yourself on what the right appearance will do for you, just pass by where there is construction underway. If you are well-dressed and have an air of prosperity and importance, workmen who might be in your path will step aside as you pass, or you might try stepping into an outer office where others may be waiting to see a certain executive. Notice that the important-looking individual with the air and voice of authority gets first attention, not only from the office attendants, but from the executive. No better example of the impressiveness of a good appearance can be given by the distinction made between individuals by attendants at a police station or jail. The stylishly dressed, well-poised businessman is seldom ill-treated, while the man who has the appearance of a bum lands in a cell almost immediately. As a police reporter on metropolitan newspapers for a number of years, I saw this happen time and time again without number. The fellow who looked as though he might be somebody who had been arrested for a minor infraction often got a chair in the captain's office until he could telephone the judge or some friend to obtain his release, while the bum was carted off to jail to get his release when and if he could. The head of a huge automobile distributing agency told me that he was frequently called upon to close a sale with wealthy men who always bought the most expensive cars. Not only do I take a shower, he said, and change all my clothes, but I go to a barber shop and get everything from a shave to a shampoo and manicure. Obviously, it has something to do with my appearance, but further than it does something to me inside. It makes me feel like a new man who could lick his weight in Wildcats. If you are properly attired when you are starting out on some important undertaking, you will feel within yourself that sense of power, which will cause people to give way before you and will even stir others to help you on your way. The right mental attitude, keeping your eyes straight ahead and fixed on your goal, throwing around the proper aura, which is done by an act of your imagination or extension of your personal magnetism, will work wonders. It is always important to remember that a negative person can raise havoc in an organization or home. The same amount of damage can be done by a strong negative personality as can be done by a positive personality, and when the two are pitted against one another, the negative frequently becomes the more powerful. An extremely nervous person in a position of authority can put nearly every person associated with him into a nervous state. You can see this happen in almost any office or shop where the executive is of a nervous type. Sometimes this emotional pattern will extend throughout an entire organization. After all, as has been said, an organization is only the extended shadow of the man who heads it. Thus, to have a smoothly running organization, all its members must be attuned to the thinking of the principal executive. A strong negative personality in such an organization who is out of tune with the ideas of management can extend his negative vibration to others and do great damage. If you will remain a positive type, avoid associating too much with anyone who has a negative or pessimistic personality. Many clergymen and personnel counselors often become victims of prolonged association with people who come to them with their troubles. The impact of this steady stream of woe and sorrow vibrations eventually reverses their positive polarity and reduces them into a negative state. To get a better understanding of the effect of these suggestive vibrations, you need only remember your varying feelings upon entering different offices or homes. The atmosphere, which is the creation of people habitually frequenting the office or home, can be instantly detected as being upsetting, disturbing, tranquil, or harmonious. You can tell almost instantly whether the atmosphere is cold or warm. The arrangement of the furniture, the color scheme, the very walls themselves, all vibrate to the thinking of the persons occupying the place and bespeak the type to which their thoughts belong. Whether the home be a mansion or a shack, the vibrations are always a key to the personality of those who occupy it. In recent years, there has been a renewed interest in the telepathy or thought transference arising out of the experiments and investigations carried on in many colleges and universities, particularly those conducted under the direction of Dr. J.B. Rhine of Duke University. The records of both of the American and British Societies for Psychical Research and are filled with case reports of telepathy, clairvoyance, and similar phenomena, but many people, despite the published reports of scientific findings, are prone to scoff at the idea that telepathy exists. It has always struck me as odd that many people who profess to believe in the Bible, in which there are countless stories of visions, clairvoyance, and telepathy, declare that now telepathy and kindred phenomena are not possible. Notwithstanding the general skepticism, some of the world's greatest scientific thinkers have declared that telepathy is not only possible, but that it is a faculty that can be used by most people when they understand it. In addition to the findings of both the American and British Societies for Psychical Research and the results made public by Dr. Rhine, there are numerous old and new books on the subject. A few of the better known ones are Mental Radio by Upton Sinclair, Beyond the Senses by Dr. Charles Francis Potter, well-known New York preacher Thought Through Space by Harold Sherman, and Sir Hubert Wilkins' famous explorer, Telepathy by Eileen Garrett, editor and publisher, and The Experimental Telepathy by René War-Collier, director of the Institute of Metaphysique International in Paris. When the results of Dr. Rhine's experiments at Duke University were first made public, there were many men who rushed into print to declare that the results could be laid to chance, and considerable time and money were spent in an endeavor to prove that telepathy was non-existent. Yet the experiments continued at Duke and other leading universities. I have often wondered why many opposing so-called scientific investigators do not try to prove that the phenomena exists rather than trying to prove the contrary. But here again, the writer has a theory that belief is a miracle worker, that this is partly substantiated by what Dr. Rhine himself says in his book on extrasensory perception. He declares that satisfactory results were secured when the experimenters caught the spirit of the thing, and that the ability to transmit and receive became weakened when the original novelty wore off. In other words, while there was enthusiasm, there was a spontaneous interest in the belief that it could be done. But when students were called back at later dates to continue their experiments in the course of their studies, enthusiasm was lacking and the results were not satisfactory. I think that anyone who understands the vibratory theory of thought power can also understand why unsympathetic vibrations can be monkey wrenches thrown into the machinery. Verification of this is found in the experiments by Dr. Rhine, who discovered in his psychokinesis tests that when a subject operated in the presence of an observer who tried to distract him and depress his scoring, the results were always below expectancy. And contrariwise, when the same subject performed alone and in the presence of a neutral or sympathetic observers, his score of successes was correspondingly high. Despite the fact that the secretary of the London Society of Psychical Research, after 20 years of investigation by its members, stated that telepathy is an actuality, and the further fact that experiments at the various colleges continue to pile up amazing evidence of existence, there are many scientific men who refuse to accept the findings. Moreover, the number of people who are carrying on investigations of their own is constantly growing, even though they are regarded in certain quarters as being eccentric and somewhat gullible. I have often wondered if those who belittle this research are really being fair, both to themselves and those who are interested in the phenomena, especially when the research may lead to greater discoveries than dream possible. You can get the same results when visitors overstay their time in your home. When you feel it is time for them to go, simply say to yourself, "Go home now, go home now, go home now." And you will find that they glance around at the room looking for the clock and say, "Guess it's about time, we're leaving." I recognize that some skeptics will say that telepathy has nothing to do with this, and that your facial expressions, your bodily movements, signs of nervousness or weariness are what warn the visitor that it is time for him to leave. However, experiment for yourself, but take care that you give the visitor no outward sign, either by word or facial expression, that it is time for his departure. You will find that there are times, especially if the visitor is intent upon putting over a point or winning an argument, that this procedure will not work. But the moment where there is a lull in the conversation, try it, and the results will astonish you. Now we're on Chapter 7. Belief makes things happen. I have long held the conviction that various forms of telepathy or thought transmission are used every day in our lives, far more than most people suspect. I believe that many great leaders, preachers, orators, executives, and so-called super salesmen, some unconsciously and others thoroughly conscious of its workings, exercise the power to varying degrees. We meet a person, and before a word is spoken, we experience a like or dislike. What is it that causes the feeling to register by some form of thought transmission? I believe that the only possible explanation of healing and affecting others at a distance is through the medium of this phenomenon, of which we are only now beginning to get a scientific explanation. Some people have had the experience of walking into a darkened room and feeling the presence of someone there, even before a word was uttered. Certainly, it couldn't have been anything else but the vibrations of some unseen individual that indicated his presence to the other person. Evidence of telepathy? What do you think? It is maintained that the first person in the room will, at the entry of the second person, think of something entirely foreign to himself and dismiss from his mind all thought of the possibility of his discovery, and the second person will not sense his presence. There are thousands of people who have thought of someone only to hear from them or see them shortly thereafter, and they have given no heed to the phenomena involved. The experiences are usually considered coincidences, but when we properly consider the power of thought, do we not have the real explanation? I cannot help but feel that anyone with an open mind and willing to read and experiment for himself will sooner or later come to the conclusion that the phenomena of psychokinesis and telepathy are realities, and as investigators have pointed out, that these powers are latent in everyone, though developed in varying degrees. When we consider the subconscious mind of a single individual as being only infinitesimal part of the whole, and the vibrations therefrom extending to and embracing everything, we get a better understanding of the workings of psychokinesis, telepathy, and kindred phenomena. In explaining psychokinesis, Dr. J.B. Ryan points out that there must be a mental attitude of expectancy, concentration of thought, and enthusiasm for the desired results if a person is to be successful in the experiments. Again, we have the magic of believing at work. The subject must have a prior belief that he can influence the fall of the dice. The writer knows that it is difficult for the average person who knows nothing of the subject to accept the idea that all is within, but surely the most materialistic person must realize that, as far as he himself is concerned, nothing exists on the outside plane unless he has knowledge of it or unless it becomes fixed in his consciousness. It is the image created in his mind that gives reality to the world outside of him. Happiness, sought by many and found by few, therefore is a matter entirely within ourselves. Our environment and the everyday happenings of life have absolutely no effect on our happiness except as we permit mental images of the outside to enter our consciousness. Happiness is wholly independent of position, wealth, or material possessions. It is a state of mind that we ourselves have the power to control, and that control lies with our thinking. Whoa. Wow, and I'm going to just give this, to close it out with a little about the authors. Born in 1891 in Portland, Oregon, Cloud M. Bristol worked for nearly 40 years as a newspaper reporter and editor, during which time he also studied law, became an investment banker, and traveled extensively. After serving in World War I, Bristol became an advocate for the rights of veterans, whom he believed could attain success in civilian life by harnessing the powers of the mind. Bristol spent most of his adult life researching and tracking discoveries and psychical abilities, and ESP, which he believed held the key to greater human potential. He died in 1951, 3 years into the publication of the classic guide, The Magic of Believing. Man. And then Mitch Horowitz, who abridged and introduced the volume, is the PEN Award-winning author of books including Occult America, The Miracle Club, and How Thoughts Become Reality. The Washington Post says Mitch treats esoteric ideas and movements with an even-handed intellectual studiousness that is often too lost in today's raised voice discussions. Man. All right, guys, and so that's going to close out the first part of these condensed classics. And the next series is going to be The Secret Door to Success, and that's by Florence Scovel Shinn.